After more than half a century of rule and 13 years after the launch of the Arab Spring, the Al-Assad family is no longer ruling Syria. This is the stunning result of a 2-week-long rebel offensive that ended last night as Syria's rebel forces stormed the capital Damascus and declared that former President Bashar Al-Assad's 24-year dictatorship was over. According to Russian state media, Al-Assad has fled to Moscow, the country that has been helping prop up his dictatorship. What was once unthinkable has finally happened. Bashar al-Assad is a soft-spoken man and a trained ophthalmologist who studied medicine in London and married a British Syrian investment banker at J.P. Morgan. But that soft-spokenness belied his use of massive and at times sadistic violence and torture to wipe out his opposition, instill fear in the Syrian people, and maintain his hold on power. It's a strategy he learned from his late father, Hafez Al-Assad, who infamously crushed an uprising in the city of Hama in 1982 that would become known as the Hama Massacre, a defining moment in the history of Middle Eastern autocrats and what might have been the single deadliest act by any Arab government against its own population in the modern Middle East. That history helps explain the joy, the tears, and the excitement that we are now seeing in the streets of Syria and in the Syrian diaspora as statues of both men are being toppled and Syrians celebrate a moment they never thought would come. But amidst this joy is also concern about what comes next. Syria, particularly this last decade that Al-Assad clung on to power, saw ugly violence and brutal economic conditions. It also saw world powers and regional actors using a weakened Syria as a violent playground in a regional power struggle. This has all led to a brain drain and displacement of many types of Syrians who'd be helpful in rebuilding the country right now. The other major concern, of course, is who are these rebels? When I covered the Arab Spring and the uprising in Syria more than a decade ago, I met with and interviewed the Free Syrian Army. Over the years, we've seen groups related to ISIS and al-Qaeda operating within Syria. Today, the rebel group that overthrew the Al-Assad regime is called Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham, formed out of a former al-Qaeda affiliate. It is led by a commander named Abu Muhammad al-Julani. While he is now a celebrated revolutionary, this $10 million bounty on him is still on the FBI website due to his role in the al-Nusra Front, which the U.S. considers a terrorist organization. He has known ties to both ISIS and al-Qaeda. Julani is now toning down his past hardline rhetoric and projecting a more moderate vision for Syria, one that is safe for all religions, including minorities. Syria has a long, diverse religious history and relatively secular society. Will religious minorities finally feel safe in this new Syria? Will its talented, creative, and educated population be allowed to build and thrive and live freely and equally? And will outside actors who regularly meddle in Syria, like Turkey, Iran, Israel, Russia, and yes, the United States, allow it to live freely? These are all concerning questions that the Syrian people are now finally free to ask and work towards answering. Joining me to discuss this and more, former diplomat Wa'el Alzayat, CEO of Emgage and a Syrian-American, and Samar Ali, who served as a White House fellow in the Obama administration at the outset of the Syrian revolution. She is now professor at Vanderbilt University. It's great to have both of you with us. Samar, I'll start with you. I want to get your feelings this evening as you see these images coming out of Syria. You were in the White House when the Arab Spring and the Syrian revolution began. What are your thoughts? What are you reflecting on 24 hours after Bashar al-Assad was forced out of power?
Well, thank you, Ayman. It's a range of emotions, and I think you captured it well when you said it's a stunning chain of events that happened over the past 24 to 48 hours. I think it's been extraordinary, and there's a roller coaster of emotions when we see these images, including the fact that I think about my late Syrian grandfather, who was a freedom seeker and a freedom fighter for decades, going back to the 1950s. As you said, there's been over 50 years of Syria being under occupation. People have felt oppressed. They have felt that brutality that you talk about. They have been living in an authorizing environment for brutality, truly. And so this is opening up a possibility. It's giving people this feeling of freedom, that taste of freedom that we also here in the United States hear and talk about so much of as ourselves wanting to protect and have as well. So the Syrian people want what people all over the world, including right here in the United States, want. They want freedom. They want security, they want prosperity, and they want the chance to feel that tomorrow is going to be better than today and that their children are going to get what they deserve. And so I think that what we're feeling right now, and as somebody who has a heritage that goes back to Syria and who spent a lot of time in Syria and out of Syria, what I would say is that people are really feeling like, is this a chance? Is this a chance for a better tomorrow of where we can leave the darkness behind and actually invest in what we know Syrian people and Syria is capable of, and have a Syria for Syria?
I'm going to ask you about that road ahead in just a moment, but Wa'el, I want to get your thoughts as well. I mean, did you ever foresee a Syria without an Assad leading it with an iron fist?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I echo what my good friend Samar has said. Did we think we would get to see this in our lifetimes? I am Syrian-American. We immigrated to the United States when I was a teenager and ended up working at the State Department on the Syria file in support of the Syrian revolution. And obviously we saw the progression of the conflict and what looked like basically a defeat for the pro-democracy movement in Syria. But many of us, including myself, always held out hope that freedom would arrive in Syria. I didn't expect it to come in this way or this quickly, a breathtaking speed that we saw just 2 weeks and the unraveling of a 54-year-old regime. But we had hoped, and many have worked for this. Credit to the Syrians themselves, to the people who basically took matters into their hands. They did not wait for a foreign country to invade the country to topple their dictator. They did not wait for the world to answer their calls of over 13 years, at least during the revolution. They marched and they reclaimed their dignity and their freedom. And for that, I think they should forever be proud.
Let me ask you, Samar, about the road ahead and what happens now. Obviously, a lot of focus is on HTS and specifically Abu Mujahid Julani, the leader of this group, who I mentioned still has a bounty on his head. We were speaking to Syrians earlier tonight. Many people are celebrating, but many people also want to see how the next period of this transition looks like. From your area of expertise, from your vantage point, what does someone like him have to do, or whoever is in charge right now in Syria have to do to give assurance, to build confidence in trying to build a democratic, pluralistic Syria?
I think there's a lot of our uncertainties here, of course, and that's what the period of transition means, as well as why it is a transition. And what I will say is, your colleagues just before, when I was listening 5 minutes before we started, were talking about the United States still having a peaceful transition, and what I'm hearing that the Syrian people want as well is a peaceful transition in Syria too. And so I think that there are, you said also the confidence, but I'd add another word too, and that's trust. How is he going, and how are they going to build trust with each other, and how are they going to maintain that trust during this transition period and beyond? And so what I would say is there's going to be a series of tests, and their first test was actually just last night, even with how Assad left the country and the statement from the rebel group themselves of how they actually said they want a peaceful coexistence in Syria, a united Syria, unity for Syria. They want to put the dark days behind, and they want to invest in brighter days ahead. I think that's very promising, and I think that's a different tone and a different message than we even heard last decade. You mentioned that I was in the White House when the Arab Spring happened and when the revolution started in Syria in 2011, in March 2011. I remember it very well. The rebel groups were in a very different place than they are right now. They are people themselves. They have been evolving. And I think what they're looking for to do is to invest in institutions, to look into see how there can be a constitution that follows a rule of law that is for Syria by Syrians. I think there's also a lot of cautionary tales that I would just mention here in thinking about that transition. And I think that we should look at what happened in Egypt. I think we should look at what happened in Libya. I think we should also look at what happened in Iraq and take lessons from that, because I don't think that those were exemplary transitions that led to what the people initially who were coming into the streets wanting and risking their lives for, we're hoping to see. So this could be a new dawn. This could be a really a new awakening. But it is, I'll just say again, it is going to be a series of tests, and that they have to pass. And people are going to be skeptical, and they're going to have questions. And I'll just say one other thing, and let's keep the focus on the people as well, and for what they want and what their dreams are and how those can be realized. Because even if the new leadership doesn't realize that, that doesn't mean that we should just completely squash their dreams and think it's not possible. Right. There can be new leaders that also emerge, but let's give that space for that. And also, I'll just add this 1.2 on the United States front. Yeah. Let's invest in this in a way, not where we're meddling, but we're actually investing in partners that want to see a better tomorrow.
Yeah, so you led me to the question I was going to ask Wa'el, as somebody who did work on the Syria file at the State Department. What does that look like? What does the international community need to do now? I mean, it's not going to be easy for the U.S. to financially support a state in which a big component of it is designated as a foreign terrorist organization.
Yeah. Well, one of the first things the administration needs to do is to make a decision very quickly on what criteria it needs to see for that designation to be modified or removed. And obviously setting certain criteria for, Tahrir al-Sham and Jolani that they need to meet, right? You need to have accountability here. The rhetoric, while has been quite impressive, quite frankly, regarding their protection, pledging to protect minority groups, the Kurdish groups, even sending letters to neighboring countries, the Jordanians, the Iraqis, pledging to, basically coexist in peace with them. But you need to verify, right? And so, but I think the Biden administration is still in office, and obviously we have an incoming Trump one. They need to decide on what is the criteria for adjusting that designation to create the space on the ground for humanitarian assistance to arrive, but also stabilization funding, development funding, homes, roads, schools, hospitals. There's a dire need of a country of 22 million, but not only that, over 6 million refugees right now are looking at what's happening in Syria. They are in Lebanon, they are in Jordan, they are in Turkey, they're in Europe. And they're here in the United States, and they're asking themselves, is it safe to return? You're seeing some incredible videos and pictures of many are returning. So there's an opportunity here even to lessen the burden, as some might say, on neighboring countries by looking at how do we send more assistance on the ground. And then on the political and diplomatic track, the United States and the allies and our neighbors and partners, and including countries that may have landed on different sides of the conflict, need to come together right now, invest in a political process that facilitates the formation of a credible body that is going to govern Syria during this transition period.